Um, as we talk about this unhurried way, we've been in this series, and what we've been discussing is how do we walk through life? How do we actually have real impact in our communities, in the busy lives that we're living? Is it possible to be busy and unhurried? And I fully believe it is, but it's really all about focus. So over the past few weeks, we've been talking about the problem of hurry. Interruptions, looking at interruptions as an invitation to love. We've talked about the danger of distraction. We've talked about the sustaining power of withdrawal. Last week, in Easter, Steve was talking to us about the God who refuses to rush resurrection. This week, we're going to be talking about the pace of presence. Sounds cool, doesn't it? Here's a question for you. What is your mission? Actually, hands up. If you have a mission in this life, put your hand up. All right? So the reality is, if you are a Christ follower, you have a mission. God has a plan for you with specific things that he wants you to experience and he wants you to accomplish. You have a mission. You may not necessarily know what that mission is. And there are times when we are in this journey where we go, I don't know what my mission is. And that's valid. But it doesn't mean you don't have a mission. And so my next question is, how do you approach your mission? Right? Do you view it as this task to be completed? Because you know, we go to work, right? We get handed the specific task that we're supposed to do, and the goal is to get that task done so you can get on with another task. Or do you view your mission as an opportunity to walk with God in something? Right? That the task itself, actually having a task, has significance and actually has value in itself. Right? It's not just something to tick off the list. There's this really interesting study that was done back in 1973 at Stanford University. And it was a study that they called the Good Samaritan Study. And there's a few different opinions of what this was, whether it was a social experiment or whether it was actually a test. But the significance of it really doesn't matter on that case. So there were some social psychologists, John Darley and Daniel Batson, who decided they wanted to know why people help in certain situations and why they don't help in other situations. And so what they did was they put this study together, and they thought, you know what? We will pick probably the people who are most likely to help people at the university. So they went to the seminary, and they selected 67 seminarians. That's a cool word, isn't it? Not to be confused with the poison. Seminarians, and they divided them into three groups. And what they did with all of them, they started off with saying, okay, so what we want you to do, we want you to study the story of the Good Samaritan. We want you to put together a short talk on that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to record it. Okay? So if you can put together your presentation, your talk on the Good Samaritan, have that ready to go. And then they divided these people into three groups, right? And to the one group, they said, you know what, they're probably not ready for you over there. It's across the campus. Why don't you, you could head over there, but there's really no rush, right? Go over there, and they might be ready for you when you get there. They might not, but there's no panic. And to another group, they said, okay, you should go now. If you get going, you're going to be there right on time. And so it was to walk across the campus to do their recording in the recording studio. Then to the other group, they went, you're still here? You're supposed to be recording right now. Get over there. So they created 3 different urgencies. And what they did was en route to where they were recording their presentation on the Good Samaritan, they had an actor in a doorway who was in obvious distress. He was eyes closed, moaning in agony. What do you think happened? So the group, who maybe are a little less charitable than you might think they would be, but in the very unhurried group, 63% of that group stopped what they were doing and took time to help this person who was in obvious distress. Only 10% of the hurried people actually stopped and helped this person. And if you feel compassion for the hurried people, you're like me. Because I have this idea that I have to get to that task. I have people waiting for me at the other end. This is being responsible, is to get there and get that done. I am so like the hurried group. It bothers me. And when you put this all together, what were they studying? The Good Samaritan. They were studying, they had prepared a talk on it. They probably were really eloquent in their presentations about how this person stopped what he was doing and went and helped this person who was in distress when no one else would help. They knew what the instruction was. They knew that this is important. They could communicate it well, and when it came time to do it, they failed. And that's what hurry does to us. When I was when I did my boot camp to join the auxiliary for the OPP, there were a lot of interesting things that I learned. But there was one presentation that a detective sergeant did, and he was talking to us about the importance of investigation, the importance of paying attention to what's going on. And he gave this a story. Now, I've tried to find it on the internet, and it isn't exactly the way that he said it. So, but who can trust a detective sergeant? But he told this story. He said there was a group of business people who were gathered for this conference. And there was this business leader who had been invited to come and talk about the secret to their success. And people had paid a significant amount of money to come to this presentation. They had had the meal, and it was time for the keynote speaker to get up and to do this presentation. And so this speaker walked up to the front, got in front of the microphone, and said this. Said, "When you're in the room, be in the room." And then they went and sat down. The secret to success when it comes to mission is when you're in the room, be in the room. It has stuck with me for quite a few years. That how important it is that when you're in the room, be in the room. There are a lot of things going on in my world. There are a lot of things going on in your world. In fact, it is probably extremely difficult for you to actually be in this room, listening to me talk. When you're in the room, be in the room. Dallas Willard says this. He says, "Hurry is the great enemy of spiritual life in our day." I believe that. We have this story of Jesus. Last week we were talking about the resurrection. This week we're talking about what happens immediately after that. And I find the story is interesting, and by my definition, almost irresponsible. When you think about what Jesus has done, he has been raised from the dead. He showed himself to Mary, and all of a sudden he disappears. The 12 disciples, 11 disciples who had spent their lives with him are wondering what is going on. They haven't seen him yet. They're curious about what's going on. They're anxious. And we pick up the story not with Jesus meeting with those people who we think matter. We pick up the story on this walk to Emmaus. And the story goes like this. It says in Luke 24, "Now that same day, 2 of them were going to the village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them." I want to just pause in that for a second. So you've got these 2 disciples who we've never heard of before. They're not part of the 12. These are 2 people who follow Jesus. Just like you, just like me. Right? Jesus raised from the dead. So much confusion going on about what's going on. And we pick up this story with 2 people just like you and I who are walking from Jerusalem to Emmaus, probably because Jerusalem is just a mess. There's so much confusion. And Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. When we look at how Jesus confronts these people, he doesn't go up and say, "Hey, it's me. Look at me, raised from the dead." He joins them in their journey. He actually matches their pace. If you read through this whole story, you're gonna recognize that at the end of this story, these 2 people end up back in Jerusalem. Like their journey to Emmaus was just a waste of time if you're all about task. Right? But Jesus joins these people as they're walking along in their confusion and disappointment. And he just matches their pace. He doesn't walk up and say, "Where are you going? You got to be in Jerusalem tonight." He doesn't go, "Why do you feel the way you are? Why do you feel that way?" He doesn't do any of that. He just comes along and actually walks with them in their disappointment and confusion. He just matches their pace. He doesn't come in and change their pace. He just joins it. The next thing that we discover in this is that the unhurried mission begins with proximity, not performance. You know what I think when it comes to mission, we actually need to earn the right to have a voice in someone's life. We actually need to deserve the opportunity for them to hear us. At least that's what Jesus demonstrates. In what is probably the most confusing time for so many of Jesus' followers, he decides just to walk at the pace 7 miles out of town, 7 miles in the wrong direction with someone. The story carries on. He says, they asked him, or he asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk?" You notice that Jesus doesn't come in with his own statements and opinions. What Jesus does is he matches their pace and he listens before he speaks. Listening is the first act of love. And I don't want to project on you sort of my upbringing, which was great. It was a great upbringing. But there was a piece of me that believed that people needed to hear what I had to say, because I had the answers. And to some extent, I had the answers for questions they weren't asking. Right? But when we look at Jesus and how he walks into this, he listens before he speaks. He says, "What are you guys talking about?" And it's almost as though he goes, "That's exactly what I just wanted to talk about." All right? So he asks them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" And then it says this, they stood still. There is so much in the Bible that if you just read over it, you kind of miss it, right? But so these people are walking, and they're walking to Emmaus. They're on their mission of getting to Emmaus before it gets too dark. And Jesus just says, "So what are you talking about?" And they go, it's like, "Idiot," right? Like, come on. What else would we be talking about? Really? What are you talking about? I mean, in the world we're at right now, you can almost do that downtown, right? Stop in at Tim Hortons and see what the guys are talking about. "What are you talking about?" They're going to go, "Idiot." They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem that does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" And I love what Jesus does. He goes, "What things?" Isn't that awesome? And I tried to come up with a good analogy with this, but it's like the kids coming down on Christmas Day and saying, "Santa ate the cookies." No way. It's like, I did it. What things? So then they go on and they say, about Jesus of Nazareth. He was a prophet. We had all this hope in him, and then he was sentenced to death, and then he died, and we thought that was it. But then, like this morning, they're saying that he was raised from the dead, but nobody has seen that. Just Mary and a few others. And like there's so much confusion going on. And then this is where Jesus turns the table a little bit. Because he goes, "You idiots." Well, he doesn't really, but he does, kind of. He says to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And then he says, "And beginning with Moses and all the prophets," which is, we would say, beginning with the Old Testament, the law and the prophets, he went through and he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. He's like, how did you miss this? You've read this your entire lives. How did you miss this? See, Jesus doesn't just match their pace, and he doesn't just listen before he speaks. Jesus explains the story. And you need to get this, because I think it's really, really important. Unhurried people don't rush transformation. They accompany it. Are you, in your mission, able to be patient with the people who just don't seem to get it? Even when you explain it. The story goes on. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he were going further. I think it's significant, but do you remember when Jesus was walking on the water? The story goes like this. The disciples are out there, the storm is raging, and Jesus walks on the water and walks as though he's going to walk by the boat. I love that. It's like, there's something to it. Jesus knows that they need him in the boat, but he doesn't enter the boat until they invite him in. All right? It's really significant in understanding our journey with Jesus. Is that Jesus knows that we need him. And he never forces himself on us. And so this whole scene gets repeated at the resurrection. And as he has walked with these people who are as insignificant as me, as he has walked with these people down the road, he has walked at their pace. He has listened before he spoke. He has shared information and given them knowledge that can help them. And he still is willing to walk by unless they invite him in. So much of our disappointment with Jesus is that we just let him walk by when we know we need to invite him into our situations. But they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening, the day is almost over." So he went in and stayed with them. And then I love this passage. He said, when he was at the table with them, he broke bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. Then their eyes were open, and they recognized him. See, Jesus matches their pace. Jesus listens before he speaks. Jesus explains the story, and then Jesus breaks bread. Sometimes we think expounding information to people is our mission. But they didn't see Jesus in that. They didn't see Jesus until he was with them personally in their experience. That he is there, sitting with them. Sometimes the clearest moments with Jesus happen in the everyday rhythms we just rush past. See, there's nowhere in Scripture where it says we should say grace before we eat. It's not a rule, and if it becomes a ritual, then you should probably get rid of it. But it's really cool when you pause with the food that's before you and go, I know where this came from. And I recognize it, and I need you simply to exist. It's in those moments where we just stop and take in the things that sustain us and pause for a minute and recognize who provided them, that we can see God. I love this about Jesus. It says, even after conquering death, Jesus is unhurried. So, I ask you again, how do you approach your mission? Do you see it as some tasks just to check off? You know, sometimes in my role, you go, so my mission is to expound truth. All right? My mission is to teach. But you know what? The God of all creation, the one who was raised from the dead, spoke truth to these people as they walked along, and they still didn't see him. See, mission is not an event. Mission is not an event. Mission is not a task. Mission at its core is a pace. Mission is walking through your everyday. Even when you're told you're late, your mission is to stop and help the man in distress. Mission is a pace. Mission is a presence. And mission is a way of life. Now, I know that this passage didn't come from the Bible, but it marks how I believe I need to live mission. When I am in the room, I need to be in the room. There is a presence here that Jesus is in this room. Am I seeing him? Are my eyes open to him? John Ortberg says this. He says, love and hurry are fundamentally incompatible. And I believe that to be true. And that doesn't mean, again, that you can't be busy. There are a lot of busy people here. There are a lot of things that are accomplished from this group of people. There are people running businesses. There are people running households. Doing all of that takes time, and it's responsibility. But am I able to be in the room that I am in while I am busy? Do you think the God of all creation could help you do that if we actually focused on him? Whatever your life is, God is able to be present in that. We're going to share in communion today. And I want to talk a bit about it. I have some friends that are going to pass it out as soon as that'll happen in just a minute. I believe that Jesus has prepared this for you and for me for this moment. And you're going to go, that's kind of weird, Kevin, and that's cool. I want you to think about it this way, and again, analogies are weak. But let's say you just had a really busy week. And let's say you just had a really, really busy day. And as you are driving home, you're going, I have no idea what I'm going to do for supper. And when you get home, all of a sudden there's a knock at the door, and the Uber driver delivers you a meal that's prepared for you for that moment. And you're going, what's this? You're going, your mom knew. Your mom knew that you had a rough day. Your mom knew what you were going through. And so she got this for you. So my question to you then is, do you write a nice letter to Uber Eats? Or do you write a nice letter to your mom, who actually made it happen? And the fact of the matter, it is the one who set it up, who was the one who was thinking about you. And Jesus said, when you gather, do this in remembrance of me. He set this up for you. He prepared this for you in advance of this day, knowing that you would have this as a remembrance of him. Broke the bread for this couple of guys that was in Emmaus. They took the bread, whatever they ate, and then they saw who he was. And he was the one who walked 7 miles with them in the wrong direction. And he was the one who listened to all of their confusion and frustration. And he was the one who explained to them what it all meant. He's that one. And so, as you have taken this, or as you take it now, can you see that on the road you just walked this week, where you may have walked in the wrong direction, where you may have been confused and frustrated, he is the one that brought clarity when you needed it. And he is the one who patiently walked 7 miles in the wrong direction with you, just so you could see him. He loves you that much. Thank you, Father, for the Son who gave himself for us, that we might see you.